When construction workers renovating the historic Fairmont Hotel in San Francisco accidentally broke through a sealed wall in 2019, they discovered something that would shake the foundations of American financial history. Hidden behind layers of brick and mortar was a steel vault containing thousands of documents, gold bars worth millions, and evidence of a conspiracy so vast it involved some of the most powerful families in California's history. But this discovery was just the beginning of a mystery that would lead investigators from the foggy hills of San Francisco to the marble halls of Washington, D.C., revealing a secret network that had been manipulating gold prices and controlling American finance for over a century. What they found would challenge everything we thought we knew about the California gold rush and the men who built their fortunes on it. The story begins not with the 2019 discovery, but with a young accountant named James Mitchell who stumbled upon the conspiracy in 1876, when San Francisco was still rebuilding from the devastating fires that followed the Great Earthquake. James was 28 years old, fresh from Boston with dreams of making his fortune in the Golden State. What he discovered instead was a web of corruption that reached the highest levels of government and threatened to destroy everything he held dear. James had been hired by the prestigious firm of Rothschild and Associates to audit the books of several major mining companies operating in the Sierra Nevada mountains. The work seemed routine, examining profit and loss statements, tracking gold production figures, and ensuring compliance with federal mining regulations. But as James dug deeper into the financial records, he began to notice discrepancies that made no sense according to everything he knew about accounting and mining operations. The first red flag appeared when James discovered that several major mining companies were reporting dramatically different gold production figures to different government agencies. The reports filed with the California State Mining Commission showed modest production levels that seemed reasonable given the declining yields from played-out claims. But internal company documents revealed production figures that were nearly triple the official reports, suggesting that vast quantities of gold were being hidden from federal oversight. Even more puzzling were the shipping records James found buried in the company files. Massive shipments of gold were leaving California regularly, but the destinations were not the expected federal mints or major banks. Instead, the gold was being shipped to private facilities in Nevada, Utah, and Colorado, places that had no obvious connection to legitimate gold processing or storage. The shipping manifests were signed by men whose names James recognized from San Francisco's social pages, wealthy industrialists who supposedly made their fortunes in railroads and real estate, not gold mining. James's investigation took a dangerous turn when he attempted to verify these shipping records with the transportation companies listed on the manifests. Every company he contacted either denied any knowledge of the shipments or claimed their records from that period had been destroyed in various fires and accidents. The pattern was too consistent to be coincidental, suggesting a coordinated effort to eliminate evidence of these mysterious gold movements. The breakthrough came when James discovered a coded correspondence system hidden within the routine business letters between mining companies and their financiers. Using a simple substitution cipher, company executives were communicating about something they called the Great Reserve, a massive stockpile of gold that was being accumulated outside of federal oversight. The letters revealed that this secret reserve was intended to manipulate gold prices and currency values, giving the conspirators unprecedented power over American financial markets. As James decoded more of these letters, he realized the scope of what he had uncovered. The conspiracy involved not just mining companies, but major banks, railroad corporations, and even federal officials who were being paid to look the other way. The secret gold reserve was being used to artificially inflate currency values during economic downturns, allowing the conspirators to profit from both the manipulation and the recovery that followed. The most shocking discovery came when James found evidence that the conspiracy had been responsible for several major economic panics that had devastated ordinary Americans while enriching the secret network. By controlling the supply of gold entering the market, they could create artificial scarcity that drove up prices and caused currency fluctuations that destroyed small businesses and family farms while generating enormous profits for those who knew when the manipulations would occur. James realized he was in possession of evidence that could expose one of the largest financial conspiracies in American history, but he also understood that the men involved had the power and resources to eliminate any threat to their operations. His first attempt to present his findings to federal authorities in San Francisco was met with polite dismissal and subtle warnings about the dangers of making unsubstantiated accusations against respected businessmen. Undeterred, James decided to gather additional evidence that would be impossible to dismiss or suppress. He began attending the social functions where San Francisco's elite gathered, using his position as an accountant for their businesses to gain access to private conversations and exclusive gatherings. What he overheard at these events confirmed his worst suspicions and revealed details about the conspiracy that went beyond financial manipulation. At a dinner party hosted by railroad magnate Leland Stanford, James overheard a conversation between Stanford and mining executive George Hearst about expanding their operations beyond gold manipulation. They discussed plans to control silver mining in Nevada, copper production in Montana, and even timber harvesting in Oregon, creating a network of resource control that would give them influence over multiple industries and entire regional economies. The conversation revealed that the secret gold reserve was just one component of a larger strategy to concentrate economic power in the hands of a small group of families who could then influence political decisions, control industrial development, and shape the future of the American West according to their interests rather than the public good. They spoke of buying congressional seats, influencing federal appointments, and ensuring that future mining and railroad legislation would favor their operations while suppressing competition. James's investigation became personal when he discovered that his own employer, Rothschild and Associates, was not just aware of the conspiracy but was actively participating in it. The accounting firm was providing legitimate financial services as cover for laundering the profits from illegal gold manipulation, creating false records that would withstand casual inspection while hiding the true nature of their clients' activities. This discovery forced James to confront the possibility that his entire career had been built on facilitating criminal activities, and that continuing his investigation would not only expose the conspiracy but would also implicate him in crimes he had unknowingly helped commit. The moral complexity of his situation was compounded by threats that began appearing in his personal life, subtle warnings that his curiosity was attracting unwanted attention from dangerous people. The first direct threat came in the form of a break-in at James's boarding house room, where nothing was stolen but his personal papers had been carefully searched and his investigation notes had been photographed. The message was clear: his activities were being monitored, and his evidence could be accessed whenever necessary. The second warning was more direct, a note left on his office desk that simply read, "Some secrets are worth more than the lives of those who discover them." Despite these intimidations, James continued gathering evidence, but he also began making preparations to protect himself and ensure that his discoveries would survive even if he did not. He created multiple copies of the most damaging documents and hid them in locations throughout San Francisco, from safety deposit boxes in different banks to hidden compartments in buildings where he had friends and allies who could be trusted to preserve the evidence. James's most important ally turned out to be Margaret Sullivan, a 26-year-old journalist who worked for the San Francisco Chronicle and had been investigating rumors of corruption in the mining industry from a different angle. Margaret had noticed patterns in mining company stock prices that suggested insider trading and market manipulation, but she lacked the financial expertise to understand the mechanisms involved. Their partnership began when Margaret approached James seeking help understanding the complex financial transactions she had discovered in her own investigation. James realized that Margaret's evidence complemented his discoveries perfectly, providing the missing pieces needed to understand how the conspiracy operated on multiple levels simultaneously. Together, they uncovered evidence that the secret network had been manipulating not just gold prices, but also railroad stocks, mining claims, and even real estate values throughout California and Nevada. The scope of their influence was staggering, affecting everything from the prices farmers received for their crops to the interest rates charged by banks for business loans. Margaret's investigative skills and James's financial expertise proved to be a powerful combination, but their collaboration also increased the danger they faced. The conspiracy's leaders recognized that the two investigators had gathered enough evidence to expose their operations and began taking more aggressive steps to protect their interests. The confrontation that would determine the fate of their investigation occurred on a foggy San Francisco evening in December 1876, when James and Margaret were lured to what they believed was a meeting with a federal investigator who promised to help them present their evidence to authorities in Washington. Instead, they found themselves facing the very men they had been investigating, in a confrontation that would test their courage and determine whether their discoveries would ever see the light of day. The meeting took place in a private dining room at the Palace Hotel, where 5 of San Francisco's most powerful men had assembled to deal with what they considered a threat to their operations and their reputations. The atmosphere was superficially civilized, with expensive wine and polite conversation, but the underlying tension was unmistakable as James and Margaret realized they had walked into a trap designed to silence them permanently. What followed was a battle of wits and wills that would determine not only their survival, but the future of American financial markets and the fate of thousands of ordinary citizens whose lives had been affected by the conspiracy's manipulations. The evidence they had gathered represented the key to exposing one of the largest criminal enterprises in American history, but only if they could find a way to escape with their lives and their proof intact. The resolution of this confrontation would ultimately expose the conspiracy and lead to congressional investigations that changed American financial law forever. But the personal cost to James and Margaret would be higher than either had imagined when they first began their investigation into the mysterious discrepancies in San Francisco's gold mining records. The confrontation at the Palace Hotel began with deceptive courtesy as the 5 conspirators attempted to convince James and Margaret that their investigation was based on misunderstandings that could be easily resolved through reasonable discussion. Charles Crocker, one of the Big Four railroad barons, spoke first with the practiced charm of a man accustomed to getting his way through persuasion rather than force. "Mr. Mitchell, Miss Sullivan, we understand you've encountered some confusing documents in your professional activities. Perhaps we can clarify these matters without unnecessary complications that might damage reputations or careers." James recognized the veiled threat immediately, but Margaret surprised everyone by responding with aggressive directness that caught the conspirators off guard. "Gentlemen, we're not here because of confusion. We're here because we've documented a systematic conspiracy to manipulate American financial markets through illegal gold hoarding and price manipulation. The only question is whether you'll cooperate with federal investigators or face prosecution for crimes that include fraud, tax evasion, and conspiracy against the United States government." The shift in atmosphere was immediate and dangerous. George Hearst leaned forward, his voice carrying the cold authority of a man who had eliminated obstacles before. "Miss Sullivan, you seem to misunderstand the situation. The documents you believe you possess prove nothing that would interest federal authorities. More importantly, making such accusations against respected businessmen could result in legal consequences that would destroy your careers and personal reputations permanently." James had prepared for this moment by studying each conspirator's background and business interests, looking for leverage that might protect them if threats escalated to violence. His research revealed that several conspiracy members had made their fortunes through methods that would not withstand careful scrutiny, even setting aside the gold manipulation scheme. He decided to demonstrate that they had gathered evidence extending far beyond the immediate conspiracy. "Mr. Hearst," James said calmly, "our investigation has uncovered irregularities in your silver mining operations in Nevada that suggest violations of federal land laws. Mr. Crocker, your railroad construction contracts with the federal government appear to involve overbilling and substandard materials that could constitute fraud. Gentlemen, the gold conspiracy is actually the least of your legal problems if our evidence reaches the appropriate authorities." The revelation that their investigation had expanded beyond gold manipulation to examine other criminal activities changed the dynamic completely. The conspirators realized they were not dealing with amateur investigators who had stumbled across limited evidence, but with systematic researchers who had been building a comprehensive case against multiple aspects of their operations. Leland Stanford attempted to regain control of the situation by offering what he clearly considered a generous compromise. "Perhaps we've all been too hasty in our assumptions. Mr. Mitchell, Miss Sullivan, your skills are clearly exceptional. We could offer you positions within our organizations that would provide substantial compensation while allowing you to pursue your investigative interests in directions that serve legitimate business purposes rather than creating unnecessary conflicts." Margaret's response revealed the depth of her commitment to exposing the truth. "Mr. Stanford, you're offering us bribes to suppress evidence of crimes that have damaged thousands of ordinary Americans. Farmers who lost their land because of artificially inflated currency values. Small business owners who went bankrupt because of manipulated credit markets. Families who lost their savings because of economic panics you deliberately created for profit. We didn't become investigators to profit from corruption, but to expose it." The meeting took a more sinister turn when Mark Hopkins, who had remained silent throughout the initial exchanges, gestured to 2 men who had been positioned near the dining room exits. James recognized them as private security personnel, whose presence indicated that the conspirators had been prepared for the possibility that negotiation might fail to resolve their problem. "Mr. Mitchell, Miss Sullivan," Hopkins said quietly, "we had hoped to resolve this matter through reasonable discussion, but your unwillingness to accept generous offers forces us to consider alternative approaches to protecting our legitimate business interests. San Francisco can be a dangerous city for people who pursue investigations in areas where they are not welcome." James had anticipated this escalation and activated the protection plan he and Margaret had developed during weeks of preparing for this confrontation. He pulled out a small brass whistle and blew 3 sharp blasts that echoed through the hotel's corridors. Within moments, the dining room doors opened to admit 6 men whose presence completely transformed the balance of power in the room. The new arrivals were not random allies, but carefully selected individuals whose interests aligned with exposing the conspiracy. Detective Inspector William Coleman represented the San Francisco Police Department's anti-corruption unit. Federal Marshal Henry Johnson had been investigating interstate commerce violations related to mining and railroad operations. Most importantly, Senator William Sharon of Nevada had been secretly cooperating with their investigation after discovering that the conspiracy's silver manipulation had damaged his own legitimate mining investments. Senator Sharon's presence was particularly devastating because it meant that their evidence already had support from federal officials who could not be intimidated or bought by the conspirators. "Gentlemen," Sharon announced, "Mr. Mitchell and Miss Sullivan have been working with federal investigators for the past month. The evidence they've gathered has already been presented to congressional committees investigating financial corruption in Western territories." The revelation that their confrontation had been anticipated and that federal authorities were already involved meant that silencing James and Margaret would no longer protect the conspiracy. The damage had already been done, and attempting violence would only confirm their guilt while adding additional charges to their eventual prosecution. Charles Crocker made a final desperate attempt to minimize the conspiracy's exposure by offering to surrender information about competing criminal networks in exchange for lenient treatment. "Senator Sharon, perhaps we can reach an understanding that serves the interests of justice while recognizing that our activities were motivated by legitimate business competition rather than criminal intent. We have information about similar operations in Colorado and Montana that federal authorities might find valuable." Detective Inspector Coleman's response demonstrated that law enforcement had been aware of the broader implications of the San Francisco conspiracy from the beginning. "Mr. Crocker, federal investigations have been coordinating across multiple territories for over a year. Your gold manipulation network was identified as part of a larger pattern of resource monopolization that threatens American economic stability. Cooperation at this stage might influence sentencing, but it will not prevent prosecution." The confrontation concluded with the conspirators under arrest and their secret gold reserves being seized by federal marshals who had been positioned throughout San Francisco during the investigation's final phase. The scale of the operation that was exposed shocked even experienced federal investigators, revealing that the conspiracy had accumulated gold reserves worth over $50 million, an enormous sum that represented a significant percentage of the nation's entire gold supply. The immediate aftermath of the arrests created financial chaos as markets struggled to adjust to the revelation that gold prices had been artificially manipulated for years. Several major banks faced insolvency when their investments based on manipulated gold values suddenly became worthless. Railroad construction projects were halted when it became clear that their financing had depended on illegally obtained profits from gold manipulation. James and Margaret found themselves at the center of a national scandal that extended far beyond their original investigation into mining company accounting irregularities. Congressional hearings revealed that the conspiracy's influence had reached into federal agencies, state governments, and financial institutions throughout the Western territories. The scope of corruption that was exposed led to new federal laws regulating commodity trading and resource extraction that fundamentally changed how American markets operated. The personal cost of their investigation became clear in the months following the conspiracy's exposure. Both James and Margaret faced lawsuits from family members of the conspirators who claimed that their investigation had been motivated by personal gain rather than public interest. Several attempts were made to discredit their evidence by claiming it had been fabricated or obtained through illegal means. More seriously, other criminal networks that had been operating similar schemes in different regions targeted James and Margaret for elimination, recognizing that their investigative methods posed a threat to illegal operations throughout the American West. Federal protection was necessary for over a year while related investigations proceeded and additional arrests were made. The gold that was recovered from the conspiracy's secret reserves was eventually distributed to compensate victims of their market manipulations, but the process took years and many damaged families never fully recovered for the economic losses they had suffered. The broader impact on American financial development was profound, as the exposure of systematic manipulation led to increased federal regulation and oversight that shaped economic policy for decades. James eventually established his own accounting firm specializing in detecting financial fraud, becoming one of the nation's first forensic accountants and helping to develop investigative techniques that are still used today. Margaret's journalism career flourished as newspapers throughout the country sought her expertise in investigating corporate corruption and government malfeasance. Their partnership, which had begun as a professional collaboration, developed into a personal relationship that led to marriage in 1878 and a lifetime of working together to expose corruption and protect ordinary Americans from exploitation by powerful interests. Their children would later follow in their footsteps, establishing a family tradition of investigative journalism and financial oversight that continued well into the 20th century. The documents discovered in the Fairmont Hotel vault in 2019 included personal letters between James and Margaret that revealed details about their investigation that had never been made public. These papers showed that their original discoveries were even more extensive than historical records indicated, and that several related conspiracies had been quietly dismantled through federal action that was never publicly acknowledged. Modern historians studying the vault documents have concluded that the San Francisco gold conspiracy was part of a systematic effort by robber baron families to control American economic development through illegal resource manipulation. The conspiracy's exposure helped establish the principle that natural resources belong to the American people rather than private interests who happen to possess the capital to extract them. The story of James Mitchell and Margaret Sullivan demonstrates how individual courage and systematic investigation can challenge even the most powerful criminal enterprises when ordinary citizens refuse to accept corruption as normal business practice. Their legacy reminds us that American prosperity depends on honest markets and fair competition rather than manipulation and exploitation disguised as entrepreneurship.